You're listening to Barbell Logic,
the podcast where we talk about what it means to experience strength
and how you can use simple, hard, and effective strategies in training and nutrition to improve your life.
It starts with meeting you where you are right now and finding lasting solutions.
Welcome to the show.
Hey everybody, welcome to Barbell Logic Beast Over Burden. Missed you all last week. I'm your host, Niki Sims. With me is your co-host, Andrew Jackson.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. All right. How is your training going? Give us some juicy updates.
Training's going good. I'm back into squatting at PR weights. I think 2x2 at 210 last Friday, which was pretty sure that's a lifetime PR. 464 or something like that. Most fun this week, I added clean and jerk back in and was able to get up to 308, 140 kilos, and missed 315 a couple times. And that's a huge breakthrough because my back has been holding me back from certain positions. You know, I've power cleaned every now and again, but getting down to the bottom of the clean has not felt good on my low back. So
yeah, it's a big catch.
It's nice to be able to push that a little bit. Yeah. So I'm just having fun with training. Bench is up in PR territory pretty much every week, both rep PRs and volume PRs. So I'm having fun.
Gosh, fun phase.
It is.
That's neat to get into that zone again. I know some people, and even like we've talked before when we've been like going through injuries and stuff, it's just like, well, I guess we'll never PR again.
When are you going to PR again?
Never say never.
Nobody knows. Nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
And you? Training?
Yeah, it's been fun. Getting back into some fun deadlifting numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a fun chin up, probably a PR, earlier this week where I did 6 reps with 50 pounds attached to my body. So I think that's pretty good. And I liked how I felt able to really grind through the rep. You know, I think that's the cool ability to chin up where sometimes you hit a point and it's just like dead. You can't do anything. But I've been doing so much arm work lately that it was neat to feel that transfer into being able to grind on some heavy chins. So that was exciting.
I noticed that with bench press as well, that after doing a lot of tricep work, I can grind through the sticking point more effectively. I think arm accessory work makes a big difference on chins and benches.
Yeah.
And press when you can build up more endurance and muscle mass in those small muscles that are the ones that tend to give out suddenly. It can really help drive the numbers up.
It really is sudden. It's like you can start this out like, I can do 15 of these. I better go up and wait. And then like when you do a bunch of push-ups, just like it's dead zone.
Yep. Yeah. The ability to differentiate between RPE, 7 left in the tank and 1 left in the tank it feels like you have 10, but it's 1.
Yep.
I think it's interesting also being in this phase of training because it is fun and yet it is also a bit of a challenge to not start expecting more. I don't have any excuse, if you will, that I have had in, over the past 5 years or 4 years where my back is always like a question mark. And now I still feel it. Every single rep, my back is still like, hey, don't forget about this pain. But
we don't want you to think that you're okay.
So it's just always there like a buddy, a little training partner. But I don't feel like it's limiting me. And so I notice that I start to expect myself to just be at whatever peak numbers I've had in the past. And I wanted to ask you about that sort of managing expectations and maybe a mental model for training, because we just last weekend also did a lifting camp with a bunch of folks in the Seattle area. It was a lot of fun. And you did a presentation at the end that I thought was really interesting and wanted to kind of pick your brain about that today if you were
I would love to share some of it, not all of it.
Not the murder podcast part.
Well, it's available for everybody on any podcast platform. Yeah, well, I guess to give an overview of what the topic was, I wanted to speak to everybody who was attending, knowing that lifting is important to them. Most of them have been clients for a while. And also knowing how important it is for the people who tend to work with a barbell logic coach that they're able to lift for a really long time and they're able to see it as a quality of life improvement. And for that to happen, it has to be something that we do for a long time. It's not a 3 months on, 9 months off kind of situation. It's a scheduled, at least, a couple times a week for years and years and years, decades even. That's what takes it from being a kind of a corrective measure where you're kind of in a panic mode of feeling out of shape and turns it into a lifetime habit that makes you more muscular and gives you a sense of control over your body composition and even over your health outcomes. So I was thinking about how to lift forever and what we've noticed in our clients who have been doing that for a long time. And, you and I have been lifting for a really long time. So I was looking for mindsets and behaviors that drive that type of living.
First off, I guess, what does that model look like and how did you get to identifying that model?
To me, there were 3 things that came to mind. One of them is the ability to plan, the ability to look forward in your week, and the ability to look forward in the next year, the ability to look forward into the next 5 years, and use that as a tool to guide your priorities and your goals and how you want to invest your time and money and how you're going to fit training into your life. That's a very important behavior, is even though it has to be kind of agile, your training schedule and what you're able to do based on where you are and what you're working on at that time, it has to happen. You have to make it fit into your life. Otherwise, it's something that you just end up missing and kicking down the road and you never do it. So I noticed that people plan to train. They build gyms, they hire coaches, they change how they eat. It's in their future and they figure out how to make it a part of their future. So I thought planning was a really important part of that. And also, there's always a component of the past in this model. And that I think is important because it drives what you want out of your future. And it also has everything to do with where you are now. And that now component is the third one, where it's the ability to sit with where you are at that moment in time and be okay with not being where you're supposed to be and be okay with being where you're at because of where you came from. And the mindset that I've found to be really important for the now part of this equation is, I think it's being kind to yourself and having empathy and appreciation for where you've come from. And this is always a big one for me personally, is not beating myself up for not being the me that I've envisioned myself to be in a year. Like having some patience with myself. So it was really the ability to plan, the ability to show yourself kindness and patience, and the ability to look back in the past and look at patterns objectively. And that, I think, really fleshes out what creates the training forever kind of sphere.
How did you come about noticing those 3 elements?
It had a lot to do with looking and thinking not so much about programming or what exercises or anything like that, but it's like the human making the choices. What are those people doing? And those people are my clients. It's the coaches. It's the thought behind what we do with TKC and what we do with barbell logic. So it's more about the behaviors and the emotions involved in deciding to train and deciding to be strong. So it really had a lot to do with looking at the humans who are making these choices and what things they do to support their decisions.
What do you notice about your own lifting forever perspective? How do you feel when you're doing that well versus how do you feel when you're not?
When I'm doing training well, I am not stuck in those phrases where I believe I should be somewhere different than where I am. And I think it's okay to want to be somewhere different. I think that drives us forward and that's a good fire for change. But I had a point in my lifting career where I was lifting a lot more than I was now as my needs started to change. And as I was dealing with some jujitsu priorities and then some back stuff and some shoulder stuff, that phrase was always like, this should feel easier. I should feel stronger. I should be able to do this. 225 shouldn't feel this heavy because I've decided it's felt so many other ways in the past. And so when like that type of mindset where I'm creating this gap of where I am versus where somewhere else I've imagined I should be, that gap, which I've described as the gap between expectations and reality, that's where happiness does or doesn't exist. The larger that gap is, the less happy we tend to be. So when we create this should factor, a pile of shoulds, if you get kind of caught up in those emotions in that mindset, that doesn't make training feel good. Like it robs me of being able to look back at what I've achieved and enjoy it, instead of deciding like this is bad where I am now. I could look back and being like, that was badass what I did. Hell yes, I'm so stoked about that. Kind of robs that joy.
When you find yourself in that expectations versus reality gap, do you have a way of bringing yourself to closing that gap or bringing yourself back into the now?
Yeah, the things that I'll do, sometimes it's almost as simple as like a 24 or a 48-hour or a week-long recall of what got me to this moment that I'm not liking. So that comes up a lot in when you have a training day that just feels rough, or in like a nutrition, body composition phase where it's just like, man, I am feeling far more sausagey than I was before. Like, where did this come from? And then I'll look back and be like, well, I was just traveling a lot. I spent a week in Prague where I drank a lot of delicious beer and ate a lot of food and didn't sleep because I was jet lagged. And then I remember how much fun it was. And so now I'm just like, well, that's what got me here. Okay. And it's not saying that it was good or bad, but it's just giving me an opportunity to decide whether or not those decisions were something that ended up being worth it for me. And then if they're not, then it gives me some criteria to plan for in the future. But it's the ability to kind of look back at the patterns that got me there and then decide, like, was that worth it or was it not? And that's an opportunity that we all have to like decide that something was good or bad. I try not to use those words, and I'm sure I accidentally have even just describing this, but if you say that something's bad, I think you can beat yourself up instead of acknowledging the choices that you tend to make and making yourself feel guilty about them, or just giving yourself some grace to make those decisions and then decide if you want to keep them in your life or not. So looking back at patterns, looking back at what brought me to what I'm feeling now, and then just saying, well, that's how it is. Okay. And then you can kind of process that and start going for something different if that's what I want.
The presentation you gave had me thinking about a lot of process improvement methodologies and models that I've used in the past, where whether it be plan, do, check, act from Deming, or Ray Dalio's learning loop, where you set audacious goals, you fail, identify the root cause, implement corrective actions, or, which is essentially the plan, do, check, act, where you've got planning. And then when you have a gap from reality to planning, then you go into analyzing the patterns and trying to understand root cause and put corrective actions in. And yet in all of those methodologies, or in my experience in lean manufacturing, or in, any kind of problem solving methodology, Six Sigma, they're really good at the planning and the root cause analysis, or the pattern analysis, I'll call it. But none of them talk about the now piece that you have in there as well. I think that was the aha moment for me, that the ability to stay present in the now while thinking about the plan and reflecting on the past patterns is an opportunity to be more objective about both, and also to enjoy it more.
Yeah, it totally lets you have something that is completely part of being a human, which is having emotions. And those can be real drivers in one direction or another. And if you don't let that happen, you end up, I think, trying to pull yourself in different ways that may not be true. They're driven by things that someone else maybe has told you should be important, or you can't figure out why you're feeling a certain way and you want to feel different, and you're just blinded by the frustration and even like self-disgust, or all you can see is the gap of where you decided you should be and where you are now, and not the actions that it takes to actually get there. So you have to incorporate the human emotional experience. And that's one of the cool things that I love about, what we do for our job is like, that's a major part of lifting and coaching, is connecting at that level, is appreciating the PRs, being there for someone during like one of the valleys of training, and not having to do that like on your own, and not discounting the things that you feel during each of those experiences.
Yeah, I noticed in my training, there are 3 different gaps that elicit large, powerful emotions. One is the expectation versus reality on things that I can control and try to plan, where I set an expectation that I will do this or should do that X, Y, or Z. I should be deadlifting 600 pounds. And the reality is I'm not. And then that will bring up a set of emotions of either anger or frustration or doubt. Yeah. Then there's another gap that occurs from things that I can't control. And it will be expectations that bring up more like fear or insecurity, because maybe it's job pressure or family stress or whatever circumstance that I can't control that is an unknown in my life. So then I fill that void of unknown with a whole bunch of stories about potential outcomes that are also not real. So that it's a theoretical expectation gap to reality. Or maybe not expectation, but just gap to reality. It's an imaginary gap to reality.
Yeah.
So every time I start getting away from reality, I notice these big emotions coming up. And then the third is looking back at patterns where I'll have some story about whatever the past that I can't change and now. So, and then that brings up shame or guilt or, things that aren't present in the moment. There's stories that I'm telling myself about the past that I can't change, that I get to then re-experience in the moment, that don't contribute to making objectively better decisions or experiencing what is objectively happening in the training right now or in life right now.
Yeah.
Along with that, I find for me, the process becomes acknowledging and accepting, and maybe I think your word was being kind with myself about whatever emotion it is that I'm feeling without attaching any meaning to that emotion. I'm feeling it, but it doesn't mean anything other than it's an opportunity, I notice, to pull the thread on which gap is it that's driving that emotion, and what do I actually want to do about it? Do I want to change the plan?
Right.
Do I want to reflect on the pattern from the past and change some sort of behavior? But I thought that was one of the cool messages that you talked about, is that your plan is a vision for the set of behaviors that reflect the person you want to become.
Yeah. The way that makes sense in my head is like, how does that person act? So I can at least start pretending to act like that person until I actually do. And it was even a useful tool when we were writing out our annual objectives for the company. For me, I had to put myself in, December of 2024 and say truths at that point. We have X, Y, and Z in place. We have this team. We have these team members. So I've created that kind of reality. And now, we're in May. And so when I'm working on like these projects that I've created, I have to actually make those true. And so by the time we get to December, I can actually be the Niki that sits there and says, we have this system in place. But until then, I have to start doing the little things to kind of build that truth. So it's definitely a little bit of fake it till you make it, which I think helps me in those moments of just emotion where you're actually not that person yet, but you can kind of escape into the person who is that person and act like them.
Do you have a concrete example of how you've done that with your own training?
Of acting like that person?
Of going through that process of visualizing who you want to be in the future, what that plan now past?
I think it comes up for me in the most concrete ways when it comes to nutrition. Training is so ingrained that, I'm always going to find the best gym where I'm traveling. I'm going to find the best gym where I'm living. Like, there's no not training future. But for nutrition, I think it becomes really kind of pronounced in that realm because there are so many decisions and actions and habits that have to take place over a pretty long amount of time for it to materialize. So for a change in body composition, I know what it feels like to feel a certain way, like to feel really lean and really powerful. And I'm able to say, when I feel like that, it's because I go to sleep around the same time every night. It's because I track my food to some extent and I'm hitting 140 grams of protein every day. It's because I eat vegetables 2 to 3 meals per day. It's because I control my sugar intake. And so those are behaviors that if I don't feel like doing it in the moment, I have to say, well, that's what that person who feels that way does. So you can do that now, and maybe you'll feel that way in the future. So for me, it comes to play a lot with nutrition, especially because there's such a delay onset. You don't get to really reap the benefits of those decisions for, sometimes like 6, 8, 12 weeks. And then you really get to feel it. But it takes a lot of just playing the part until you get to really enjoy it. Has that come up for you in nutrition too?
I notice it in my training a lot. The presentation that I spoke about was the philosophy of accumulating hard sets. And
Yeah.
I think about it a lot over the last 2-3 years when my day-to-day performance is so all over the place. And yet I plan, and the set of behaviors that I aspire to is somebody who shows up and does hard work every single session, even if any given day the weight might be down 5, 10, 15%. And I've been much more able to be present and in the now and totally okay with whatever the weight is on any given day. And when I'm able to show up and like Tuesday, I had more energy, could push it, then I push it.
Right.
And I have a program and a structure in place and I'm consistent with my training, but the set of behaviors that I aspire to is way more flexible. It's not that I'm trying to hit certain weights on any given day. It's that I'm wanting to be consistent about showing up and doing that hard work and then take the opportunity to push the weight up when it's there and accept where the weight is when it's not.
Yeah.
And that's made training so much more fun because now I go into the gym every time. I used to drive into the gym being like, oh, I wonder what today is going to be like. Is this going to be a good day or bad day? Now they're all good days. It's just, some days don't feel as good, but at least I'm not beating myself up as I leave the gym because I didn't hit some number.
And you did the work that you needed to do
Exactly
to take you forward according to your plan. Because sometimes people can get so discouraged by where they're at on a given day that they'll leave the gym.
That's exactly right. That's the one that concerns me the most. My clients, they leave a comment because they missed one rep or they just couldn't do the weight assigned on one particular day out of hundreds of workouts. And they're just so demoralized that it carries into like the next 2 weeks of training, and you got to like build back up. And I think your model, at least that type of thinking about, again, to me, the heart of it being that ability to accept where you are while still striving to that plan. The motivation to strive is not out of like punishment of your current self like it's a totally different energy. It's aspirational instead of this negative, like I need to fix myself kind of a thing. Like process improvement is a really powerful thing to be able to do in all aspects of your life. But I've been in so many environments where it's a negative thing. Like you set up all these visuals to be able to identify what's not on plan. And there's just so much negative energy that goes into if you're not on plan, as if the expectation is that you're always on plan. And yet at the same time, as soon as you set a plan that you hit all the time, then it's not aspirational enough. So you got to ratchet the numbers up.
Right.
And so you just kind of live in this world of always feeling like you're not enough. It's not fun, not a fun place to be.
Yeah. And you totally are almost blind to seeing all the things that you've accomplished, even to get to that, air quotes, mediocre state.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate the model. I think it's really powerful.
Thanks.
I hope that you continue to flesh that out and
Yeah, I think I will.
Put that down on paper or something, because I think it's really a powerful shift in mindset.
Thanks. Yeah. I'd be curious to hear if it resonates with anybody, if you start using that concept of, writing out the actions and behaviors of the person who you strive to be, and then how you can start acting like that person. And then all of a sudden, what was planning is now your past patterns. That's a really cool transition. Awesome. Well, thanks for the fun questions. I appreciate it. Thanks for listening today, everybody. We will be with you again next week. If you liked this, we'd love a share. We'd love a review. And we'll see you next week on Beast Overburdened.
Bye-bye.